What's up, guys and gals? Welcome back to the Nerd Castle. Today in the world of indie games, we're going to be playing around with a title called Bladesong. Kind of an interesting one. Didn't really hook me at first, but after I put a couple more hours on into it, I started to see sort of what they were playing around with. So in Bladesong, you are one of the last blacksmiths on Earth. You live inside the last bastion of humanity. Everything on the outside of that is a wasteland, and you are responsible for supplying various people trying to defend themselves with weapons so that they can slay the monsters and the hideous post-apocalyptic beasts that live outside of the city. However, you never go out there. You are a blacksmith, so you take orders and you hear hearsay, and the game is kind of split in between a bladesmithing simulator, which is quite in-depth and is actually kind of like getting your own copy of, oh, I don't know, something like Maya or Blender. I don't know what 3D modeling programs people are using nowadays. In my day, we used Lightwave. But anyways, you've got that part of the game, and then you've also got a narrative part of the game where you go into town and talk to people, and there's quests, and there's sort of like, I guess, a narrative track that you can follow that gives you some context to the game's world. If after watching this you wanted to get Bladesong for yourself, I got a link for you down below in the description. It's in playtest right now, so you got to apply for it, but you should get in. You'll also find other links to associated Nerd Castle stuff, but for now, let's go ahead and dive on into the game and give this thing a crack. Divinity has ended and the world lies in ruin. After a perilous journey across the broken flats, you reach a camp at the walls of Aaron Keep, one of the last bastions of humanity. People here are desperate, longing for life within the safety of the city walls under the watchful eyes of the masked king. One evening, a guard of Aaron Keep approaches, easily noticed among the squalor of the camp. The city is in need of a blacksmith, and you are the one to fill that role. Under the envious cries of the other refugees, you are led through the main gate and then to an old smithing workshop, your new home. Alright, so let's take a look at this sword over here. So this is where the game is going to teach us some of the basics. So everything that a sword needs is a point. You gotta have like a little bit of stabby business inside there if you actually want it to function. And so let's take this right here and we'll form out the point. Perfect. And then we'll apply it. We've got the width over here. We just got to get that lined up ever so slightly and then apply it. We've got the taper width. The taper width is going to determine, I think, yeah, like so, how the blade tapers from the guard down to the tip of the sword. And then from there, they want us to narrow a section of the blade. So let's see if we can do that. Let's go over to here. And then we'll take this, we'll narrow that down to right there. And as you can see, the game basically gives you your own copy of Blender to play around with crafting swords and then sort of gamifies it a little bit. And so we'll go to change width over here. And then we can change the types of curve that go into the blade as well. It wants us to do a 3 for right now, but there you go. We've got that all nice and connected. And then we've just got to kind of like play around with this bad boy over here. So we can also add clever little curves and whatnot should we desire to do so to the blade, like that right there. And then you can kind of get creative with it. Remember that sometimes you can left click and right click on various things. This game doesn't do a great job of reminding you of all the tools that you can use, and quality of life is really lacking inside of this game. I'll explain what I mean as we get further, but there's our first little blade that we've whipped together. Not too bad, I'll take it. We also need to put a cross section in the blade. So the cross section is kind of how the central ridge of the sword tapers down to the edge. This guy right here is the cross section, and we can make that really severe, we can make that really slight. It's up to us how we want to do it, but I'll just even it out in the middle and make the thing look good. Perfect enough, and now we get to add parts to the sword. There are many different guards, there are many different grips, there are many things you can do in this game in order to make stuff happen. You can also cycle through what you have available just in case that's what you want to do. And so we'll go with an oval right there, and then maybe we'll go with an oval with a slight taper. Good stuff. And then we'll put a pommel on it, and looky there, our first sword has been completed. That's a devious looking little pig sticker right there. Although, it does provide you with a place to hand and a half it, which is kind of nice. Maybe wrap that up in leather a little bit, make it a little bit squishier, a little bit more comfortable on the fingies. and then we'll finish our first sword. So day 1 is ended, and we've got our first work week. Let's stay in the forge for right now. Later on, the den is where all the narrative stuff happens, and the game is actually pretty well written. There's a lot of reading and a lot of storyline and exposition inside this game for what is basically a workshop simulator RPG. And so we need to make a sword for Fleet Fingers. There's only 2 things we have to worry about right now, weight and balance. As the game gets more complex, it's going to add more and more things that you need to take care of in order for this all to work. And so we'll start forging right here. We want to take off the pommel, put that one on right there, and then the sword's weight got a little bit better when we fooled that around. Pay attention to the way that these change up here. So in general, this meter is telling you where the weight is at on the sword, whether it's towards the front or whether it's towards the back. And then this is just additive. The more weight that you add to it, it just goes up. That's the sum total weight, and that's the balance of the weight. Now what we need to do is we need to thin out the blade a little bit. And so we'll apply that taper right there, and that brought us right back to where we're supposed to be. It balanced out the sword. It also got our weight exactly where the client wanted it to be. As you get further on into the game, they'll add stars and they'll add grades of success to this thing over here. And the closer you get to the grade of success, the more money you're going to make and the more reputation you're going to get for doing the job. But there you go. We'll go ahead and take the offer. Fleet Fingers says it's good work and matches what he had in mind. I'm happy to accept this blade and pay you the agreed upon price. Perfect. So we'll just pass a day. So now we've got the opportunity to get a little bit sandboxy. We're still not out of the tutorial just yet. I know that because I've played like 3 or 4 hours of the game, but I kind of hit a stopgap where I couldn't figure out what to do with a couple of orders and couldn't get them like just the way the client wanted them. And so I figured we'd go from the top because you do get some of the exposition and whatnot if we go from the top rather than me just explaining it. We've got Thomas Pines over here. Thomas Pines wants a heavy longsword. We've got Andrew Fletcher who wants a heavy sword. Doesn't matter if it's long or not. So we need to buy a couple things in order to make this happen. I'm going to buy a hexagonal grip, and then maybe I'll get a tree root grip right there because that'll look kind of cool. The poplar, it's lighter. So you'll notice that everything has like a metric weight on it, 30 grams, 18 grams. That's going to let you vaguely in your head figure out how much it's going to adjust the weight of the sword and how much it's going to adjust the weight of, or the balance of the sword. And so I like to have a little bit of everything. And so I'll probably get, where's just like a normal, all right, we'll just grab a couple of those. And then I got to go to the ironmonger and we're going to spend some money getting a couple different guards of a couple different weights. And then we're also going to try to get pommel jewels down here of varying weights. That way we've got something to play with while we're doing these orders. And let's go in and let's mess around with Thomas Pine's blade. So this is our first blank right here that we've got to fool around with. If you don't like the background, you can change it around. I'm sort of partial to this wooden one right here because I feel like it gives you the best view. You can't get up underneath it, but it's kind of like you don't really need to get up and underneath it a lot of the time. So he wants it to be a pretty heavy sword, and he wants it to actually favor the blade when it comes to the balance. So this guy's trying to wield this thing like a machete. We shouldn't have to play around with it too much, but we do have to get piercing damage and cutting damage inside these little thresholds right here if we want to get paid. So let's start off with a point to the sword. Let's just give it a tight little point right there, and we'll kind of like draw it in. And that got us right to where we wanted to go, but the sword lost material, so our weight has gone down, and we're going to have to counterbalance for that somehow. Balance is still looking pretty good. Now we want to work on our cutting damage, because as you can see, the blank doesn't have an edge to it. So let's assign the cross-section. The cross-section effectively just creates a channel that determines how steep the dip is towards the edge of the sword. In general, if you draw it all the way towards the center, it'll be sharper and stabbier and cuttier. Let's get that to like right there, and let's see what that does for our cutting. Now that also eliminated a bunch of the material for the sword. So, in order to get our cutting a little bit stronger, we need to find a way to make this weightier. And the best way to do that is just to like, actually, let's put all of our furniture on first. We'll put our furniture on, and then we'll figure out what we need to do here. So we'll go with this little oval grip right here, and then we'll have it taper back like so, just so it looks a little fancier. We need to get a guard on this thing. And if we want to make it work from where we're sitting, we're going to need a much heavier guard. So we'll put that in right there. And we want to get this as close to the star as we can get it. Unfortunately, if we go with a heavy pommel like that right there, it's going to take us out of our threshold. So we may want to go with something a little bit lighter. That guy right there messes with our balance, but it kind of gets us where we want to go. We can adjust it a little bit in terms of cutting power and in terms of balance by changing the width of the blade ever so slightly. So let's widen the blade just a little bit, and looky there, it took us right to where we wanted to go. We'll now offer it to the client. He will give us $143, so that works out great. And then we've got Andrew Fletcher to mess around with. Let's start forging. The game is actually... So the game doesn't give you... What I would like to see is that when you're widening the blade and you're tapering the blade, it should give you a gray preview right here of how it's going to change the sword. I swear to God, because I spent so much time with this title, like an hour and a half, 2 hours, just fiddling with different adjustments to see what it changed, and now I've kind of committed them to memory so that it's second nature. But I do think that for a new player, they could do a little bit better with the tutorialization and explaining to you what the effects are of all of these various functions that they just kind of throw you into the deep end with. I brute forced it, and if you really think about it, it's all logical. Like, when I thought about it in my material brain, the changes that were happening weren't making sense, but when you're a new player, I found that it was a tiny bit overwhelming, I guess. So with this guy, we don't really need that much piercing. I'm just going to do that right there. That should be good enough because we don't have a star inside of there, so we get full credit as long as it's in there. We'll cross-section out the sword now, like so. And that kind of gets us to where we want to go, so that's good. We're still in the right neighborhood. We do need to bring the weight of the sword up, and it's really, really front-heavy right now. So let's slap our furniture on here and see how that adjusts everything. If it adjusts it at all, in all fairness. We could go with something like that right there. It'll just let you keep stacking parts, by the way. The game doesn't care. You can just keep stacking parts until you're happy with it. It doesn't matter if your sword looks like a weird, strange mall ninja bastard that nobody would ever wield. You can just keep adding and stacking more parts and creating basically... you ever see any of those Frankenstein guns from Escape from Tarkov where people just go nuts with a Mosin and make something disgusting looking? You can do that in this game. You have the full freedom to do that if that's what you want to do. However, we do need to drag the balance and the weight a little bit further out. So I'm going to come back over here. We're going to widen the blade ever so slightly and just see if that helps us out. It did. I could add some more thickness to the blade as well, but that'll lower our cutting power. So with this one, I would say just turn it in. He's going to pay us less because I wasn't close enough to the star that's on weight. So he wants it to be more front heavy. I suppose I could adjust that a little bit. I guess I could adjust it a little bit by putting a heavier guard on it. Whenever you want during an order, you can just bail out and go to the ironmonger real fast. I'll buy a heavier guard and we'll see what happens with it, but we'll continue forging with it. So take that bad boy off. And what's that going to do to me? It probably gets me a little bit closer. He's 82% satisfied with that. And then technically I could widen the blade a little bit further. And that'll add both weight and balance. Give it a few more pixels right there. And there you go. Now we're getting a 20% bonus. This is an outstanding blade. You can almost feel it come alive in your hand. Except for that weird grip, bro. It's got a really strange grip on it. But if you're happy, I'm happy. I'm cool with the process. At the end of the day, you can either stay in your forge and you can keep working, or you can go to the den. So let's go ahead and go to the den real fast. The den is more than a tavern. It's a shrine to past glories and future conquests. The taxidermied head of a colossal bear is mounted like a grim totem watching over the crowd. Patrons drink beneath it as if, in the absence of the old gods, they have found a new, unspoken deity. The bar's typical clientele are men and women whose scars outnumber their teeth. The timber columns are scarred with the marks of prior brawls, and the rough floor has been scrubbed, but not quite well enough to remove ancient stains from spilt beer, and you suspect blood. So we can assess the clientele, we can examine the bear's head, we can approach the bar. really up to you, whatever you want to do here. Let's go ahead and examine the bear's head. Hanging like a hideous moon over the main hall is a taxidermied head of a colossal bear. Clearly unnatural in origin, fanged and terrible. Horns branch from its misshapen skull, grasping at the ceiling like claws. It can't be real, can it? Your eyes trace the stitching around its jaw where the face was once slashed in battle. You've heard rumors of worse things roaming the wasteland, but never seen such vivid evidence. Okay. The barkeep is ensnared in an argument with one of the crows. The crow is a hulking figure, arms corded with muscle, bald-headed except for a black top knot. He is also drunk beyond redemption. Even his comrades had given up on him for the night. But the barkeep isn't a small man either. He stares down the crow without apparent fear, casually reaching under the bar to some hidden implement of war. Listen carefully, I won't tolerate that kind of talk in my tavern. If you wish for death and want to keep insulting the masked king, take it elsewhere. You're not going to do it under my roof. The crow shouts something obscene and storms out into the street. Shaking his head ruefully, the barkeep turns his attention to you. They're like children sometimes. What can I get for you? Pint of Reliable? Something stronger? What about something stronger? He nods over to the gang of crows, and one of them grins in return, revealing a set of hideous yellow fangs. Skull Kicker, it's their favorite tipple. 1 glass and you're seeing double. 2 glasses and you're seeing things that ain't there. 3, you won't see anything ever again. Used to be illegal back before the end of Divinity. Now the crows swear by it. I got some questions. Do you serve food? We got 2 kinds of stew, rich and lean. One of the crows overhears this and leans towards you with a grin. Let me translate that for you. Your stew can be lumpy or watery, but lumpy costs more. I'll have lumpy? You place some coins on the bar with a ration token. The barkeep sweeps them up, then drops a bowl of thick brown liquid in front of you. Lumps of gristle bob unappetizingly in the mixture. It tastes better than it looks, and it took care of your hunger. All right, we'll step away from the bar for right now. You can also assess the clientele. So as we go through here, you can talk to various people inside the bar. They will give you quests and sort of like meta-narratives that are happening while you're playing the game. And I haven't seen it in the hours that I played. I didn't see it fold into any of the bladesmithing so far, but it should. So hopefully that's forthcoming. We'll go back and let's get back on our forge and see what we can accomplish here, because I've got things I want to do. They've congratulated me for getting out of the tutorial, and we've also gotten a complimentary free level right there. And here's where the RPG mechanics come in. Your first skill point just makes you a blacksmith. That's pretty much it. But from there you can spend skill points to get more efficient at crafting, because now we've got a meter that we need to mind. So for example, we've got these action points. These action points dictate what modifications we can make to the sword in a given period of time without resting. And that's where the game starts to press up on you a little bit, is that you're expected to get these things done inside the limited parameters. I haven't seen any punishments for not completing commissions just yet, but so it's at this point I figured I would drag you back into some more advanced gameplay. So this is a different profile that I have that's level 7 right now, so that you can take a look at the sword building and see if it's the kind of thing that's going to be a good time for you. You've gotten some of the thematic stuff, you got the intro to the game, you got me going through the tutorial, and so now you can see what a character who's like level 7 or level 8 can actually accomplish when you go in here to customize your swords. So it's a fresh day. Not really a whole lot going on right now on day 24. I do need to visit and see if anybody has. I've gotten to, so you can learn the different blueprints for these things that you buy inside of shops. If you have 3 copies of them, you can permanently memorize them, and then you can just trade your labor over here in order to conjure them out of thin air, and the game is sort of like conceptualizing the fact that you went and crafted it yourself. But I've been buying out the shops whenever I possibly can so that I can get all of the different matching patterns and whatnot, so I can get more creative with it. In a lot of ways, I feel like your enjoyment of this game is contingent on how creative you are, which is why I think it took me a bit to sort of like accept and get into, just due to the fact that like I'm not a very creative person. So this guy wants an average longsword. We're gonna take some serious weight on this thing, and then we're gonna have to like fight it back up to the top. So let's go through some basic swordsmithing here now that we have an order that's requiring us to do like all of the full capabilities. I'll just kind of talk through my decision process while I do this here. The first thing that I always like to do is just throw a point on it. This one needs to be pointy, but it doesn't need to be crazy pointy. So we'll kind of like take that down a little bit. I know you would say that like all swords are supposed to be pointy, but some of them have more rounded edges than the others. And so we'll start out right there because this thing's cutting ability really doesn't matter once we start to piece and put it together. So now that we've got the tip on there, our weight went down a little bit because we removed material. Our balance is still more towards the blade than it is towards the back of the sword. So that's good because they want this to kind of be a long sword that's got a median weight but also focuses on being heavy towards the blade, and so it should be easy to sort out here. The next thing we need to do is we need to put a cutting edge on this bad boy, so let's just cross-section it on out. I'm going to give you the thematic view right here. Also, I find it a little bit easier to see the contouring when I have it on this window right here. There are multiple layers that you can use in order to get your cross-section done exactly the way you want it. So if you go from the top, it's going to look edgier when it goes in towards the center, like you can see right there. If you go from the middle one right here, it's going to look more rounded. You're basically controlling the depth outside of the central channel. And then this outside one doesn't look like... Oh, there we go. Okay, so the outside one's just going to determine how much of a blade it has versus how flat it is, if you take a look right here. So yeah, that's how that works right there. I'm going to cancel that out because I don't know what changes I made, but we do need to cross-section this sword, and because they want it to be on the pointier end, a general rule is the thinner this channel is at the top if you're manipulating the central line, the more stabby it'll be. And so there we go. That took us exactly right to where we want to be. At this point, if there was any further problems that we had to play around with balance or weight, I'd play around with them, but this should be fairly easy to suss out. We do need to put a lot more weight on this thing. I keep this guy here as kind of like a measure, and so I'll put him right there. And that doesn't look like it affected our balance altogether that much, and this is double the weight of that one that we're carrying right there, so let's just conjure up one of these bad boys and see what happens. Conjuring, and it actually didn't affect our balance hardly at all. I'm a little bit shocked because that's a very, very heavy guard right there. Okay, well, let's throw in 2 of those right there. That looks all right to me. And then we're going to want some mild risers for the center just to give it a little bit of texture to break up the connection to the guard right there. We're also going to put high risers right there and right there, and depending on what pommel we put on here. So if I put a 300-gram pommel on there, what's going to happen to me? So a 300-gram pommel is going to mess with our balance pretty badly and bring it back towards the sword. It's also going to mess up our weight a little bit. So ideally, we need something that's under 300. That guy right there actually puts us directly on point for where we want to be at with this blade. So not too bad. Not terrible in the slightest. You can connect things to any point that you want on the sword to make kind of like Mall Ninja-esque designs if you want to. Right now I'm just trying to get you guys into the core basics of sword building because I don't know how I'm going to piece this video together. This video went through like 5 different re-records and I'm going to be piecing all kinds of footage together. And hopefully it gives you some semblance of a continuous narrative, but this sword is basically done. We don't really need to do a whole lot with it. Nor could we if we wanted to. So I'll just kind of like leave that where it's at. We'll offer it to Bryn, and Bryn is going to give us a 20% bonus for concluding the job. That's also going to take us up to level 8. I do have some things to play around with here that I've gotten around. I can bend swords. We could buy that. I can get curved blades. I could just get more work productivity during the day if that's the sort of thing that I wanted. I kind of like the idea of polishing the swords, though. Let's polish the swords. I don't know if that's actually going to affect the stats at all, but it's a fun technique to learn, so we'll go ahead and get it. These guys right here want a light sword. This person wants a light short sword, so we're going to have to kind of counterbalance that one a lot because they want this one to be a lot of things that are going to be challenging for it to be without a very heavy pommel and a very heavy guard, I think. And so this one could be kind of interesting. Which one pays the most? This one right here. Jarl Barnes wants himself a light sword. Okay, so let's have a little bit more fun with this one. Let's play around with some tools here. So what I'd like to do is I'm actually going to change out the width going out to like right here. that was a taper. We don't want to do that. We want to change the width. And so what I'm going to do is I've kind of got like a little plan here for what I'd like to do with this thing. And if we zoom in a little bit further, let's just take that out a little bit, and then we'll apply it. That should make the sword a little bit heavier. But the other thing that I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to taper the width down this way. And this is where I'm going to try and put some creativity on display. We'll taper that out to like right there, which will add a little bit of weight. And this is also drawing the weight of the sword back towards this side. So that should work out for us. They want it to have pretty good stabbing powers. And cutting is kind of an afterthought, so unfortunately, I think we're going to have to put a gnarly point on this thing. They've said, and so with this guy right here, that's a little ugly, but I think it'll work out if we change the width of the blade right here. Yeah, kind of like that right there, I think. And that's going to take our weight way up, but that's okay because we're going to lose a bunch of weight as we try to get this thing to a killing point. So we'll take that one back a little further like so. And that gave us a nice little, it's got kind of like a, it's got a bit of a Gladius-like look to it, so that might work out. We can give this thing a little bit of depth, I think. So let's cross-section it back to here. And in cross-sectioning it back to here, let's just kind of see how cool we can make this look. I don't want it to be cross-sectioned all that much. I just want it to be cross-sectioned slightly. So we'll apply that right there. We just kind of want this to be rounded out. And then we're going to cross-section from there down. And that's where we're really going to get our edge from. So there we go. That'll probably do it. That did bottom out our weight a little bit, but I think it'll be okay. And it didn't get us to where we want to be with piercing. And so what I'm going to need to do now is I need to de-thicken the blade. And so from right there, we're going to take this and we're going to drop it by like 50%, I guess. And that did get me to where I was trying to go, so that's good. It's starting to take a little bit of form here. Let's take and see what hilts we have available. So that hilt right there is definitely getting us towards where we want to go. So I'll slap that on for right now. We know that that weighs, like, what, roughly 150? Yeah, 150, so that's pretty divisible right there. I'm going to have to get the weight down a little bit because what I think is going to happen is I'm going to overshoot weight while trying to get the balance to the back end. But that's where we get to play around with fun tools like fullerizing. And so the fuller is the indentation on the blade that runs down it. It actually gives the edges rigidity based on engineering principles. But in this game, it's a great way to eliminate weight. All right, that's what I typically use it for. It might be what it's used for in engineering as well. Let's go with a hilt real fast, and we'll throw that on there. And I'm going to craft these kind of one by one because I don't know exactly how this is going to play. Let's put a riser right there. We'll put like a riser right there. And that'll drag us back a little bit. And at this point, I think we're going to need a pretty considerable drop. So the 262 is not going to do it. But that guy will kind of get us there. We still need to draw the balance backwards, though. So our better choice might be to slap this bad boy on here and sort of see where that takes us, because we've got to get some weight to the back of the blade. I think the other thing I could do is I could widen this guy ever so slightly. So let's do that. I had to go bypass a day real fast to get my energy points back. That's why there was an edit right there. So let's see that we take this right here. We just widen that out a bit. I dragged it back a little bit, but not as much as I would have liked it to have. So let's slap that pommel on there for right now. And now that we've got that pommel on there, I think it's time for us to play around with the fuller tool. And so let's go with a rounded fuller. And the rounded fuller is going to go down to about right there, and I don't know what's going to happen. It gave us a little bit of weight. Not as much as I would have liked to have gotten, but a little bit. But the good news is we're fighting back towards, so I find that moving downwards is easier than moving upwards. Gaining weight is harder than losing weight. It's the opposite of real life. So we'll take that down by about 30%. And see what happens. That did get us roughly where we wanted to go. And it's a cool looking sword, man. I don't mind the way that it looks. I actually think it looks pretty great. I can't have the fuller back here because the game doesn't tell you. There should be like a line that tells you where it makes the balance go up and down from. There's a number of things with this game's UI that I wish that it had, but unfortunately it does not. Lots and lots of quality of life opportunities there for them to make the game feel a little bit better in terms of just like the player experience, but that's not too terrible right there. I don't hate it. Like, it looks like, I mean, the guard is a little comically oversized, I suppose. But it's still a cool looking thrusting sword, I guess. Looks like you could definitely pig shank somebody with it. So let's offer it on up. There's our $158. I was hoping I would get some heavy weapons in here, because that's where you really get to have fun. Because heavy weapons are additive. Like, you get to add more blade. You get to add more sort of embellishments and whatnot. I find that what you can do, due to the fact that the game won't let me shorten the blade, you can't shorten the default blank that they give you. Or at least I haven't figured out a way to shorten and lengthen the blade. It's always the same size, but the difference is like the thinness of it, I guess, and the thickness of it. It's strange, because sometimes, like, I know you could draw the center of gravity back towards the hilt by making the sword shorter, and that would also reduce weight, which would have been a great solution right there. That would have fixed a lot of my problems being able to do that, but unfortunately we weren't able to. This guy wants a very, very light longsword. Okay. So this should get sort of curious and interesting. Anytime that you've got the weight bottomed out and the balance like up to the top or somewhere near the opposite side, things get a little bit interesting with your crafting. Oh, there's a toggle symmetry button up here. I found it. How did I miss that for like an hour and a half? I swear to God, I went through these buttons. I swear to you. I swear to you that I went through all of these buttons. Well, I wanted to draw this all the way back over to here so that I could have like a cavalry sword, but I think it's going to be impossible to get the point out of it that we want. Huh. Well, I can't get the back end to draw to a point right here, so this is probably something I should have practiced before I got in here. But that should be stabby enough. He wants it to be very, very stabby. And so let's give it a point like that right there. That'll work out. We got to bottom out our weight anyways, which is going to make this one a little bit vexing. And so, while bottoming out the weight while making sure the blade is moderately heavy, it's going to be a weird one. Buckle up. It's going to be strange. I'd like to give myself a little more weight to work with. And so, I'm going to draw... Ooh, wrong key. I'm going to draw this out a bit. It's not going to add much weight, but it'll add something. Look, Ma, I made a sword. There you go. Give that to the client. That'll make them happy. All right, so for the light longsword, I think what I'd also like to do is taper the width from like there down to here. I just kind of want to see what I can do for a second. We can give it like a little bit of a bulge, I guess. Throw a little bulgy boy on there. Oh, I know what I could have done. I could have right-clicked the points to make it round inwards instead of rounding outwards. Ah, it's too late now. That would have been nice. That probably would have looked cool. Damn. Well, too late now. Let's go, and there's no undo button, I don't think. Actually, there is. There we go. Let's give it a little bit more like a roundy boy look to it, I guess. I don't know if it's going to look pretty when we get done, but now what we need to do is we need to cross-section this thing. I'm going to cross-section it twice. So I'm going to cross-section it for extra texture. To like right there. Take that to right there. Then we'll cross-section it again. From this point. And this thing needs to be pretty stabby, huh? Alright. Well, let's get it extra strength stabby then. So it looks like it's pretty stabby right now. It needs a little bit more piercing, but we can get there with a special trick I call reducing the thickness of the blade by like 30%. There we go. Bing bong, all good to go. Alright, so the thickness of the blade has been reduced. And if we need to get more weight off of it, we can end up going with a fuller that runs down the blade, I guess. I suppose I could do like a little fuller right here. Just like out to there. Yeah, just do it real quick. It'll look cool. That's why we do everything in this workshop, to make it look cool. I feel like that could afford to be a little longer, but whatever. We're going off of creativity and gut feelings right now. A few more risers. Maybe I'll put a strong riser on that one. Yeah, that looks okay to me. I still need to get the balance sorted out. The balance is still a little wonky. That'll get us there, and I can probably reduce the thickness of the... How much does that weigh? 262? Do I have anything a little lighter? Yeah, I think that'll work right there. I think that'll do its thing. And this game only gets more sophisticated the more you play it. You get to etching and runes. You get to, like, being able to curve into scimitars and stuff like that, dude. You get to put, like, giant flaming jewels inside, like, the pommels and inside the hilts. You can stack any parts you want, by the way. Like, I could put these right here if I wanted to, even though they're pommels. And there you go. Now we've got a totally Mall Ninja'd up sword. I think what we're going to have to do from here is I've got to get both the weight and the balance down. And that means I'm going to have to change the width of the blade. We're going to make this a little skinny slip of a thing. Let's go like that. Just kind of like see what that does for us. It worked! Kinda. I mean, we've got 80% satisfaction. Do we really need to test ourselves here? What I really need to do is I need to play around with the symmetry system and figure that out. I don't want to spend 2 parts, by the way, on one sword. So I'm just going to take those off right there. Look, it's the pommel that every sword that you buy at a Ren Fair has. I don't know why every sword you buy at a Ren Fair has that pommel, but I swear to God, I've seen that pommel 850 billion times at Ren Fairs, at like the little sword stalls where they sell you blunt swords and whatnot. We're like, the finest steel! Alright, so... honestly, I think that's good enough. This is a really difficult order, and I think we've got it close enough, and I think it's pretty cool. Let's put it on the forge real fast. There we go. Yeah! Now we're looking all on theme with the moody lighting and whatnot. Hell yeah. Alright, well, let's just offer that up. I mean, a paycheck's a paycheck, I guess. I'm out of energy points, so that's that. Let's end the day real quick, and then we will stay in the forge, because the den only seems to have, like, a quest or 2 right now. I don't know. They want my money, and I don't want to give them my money. You know, that old tale. But in closing, my thoughts about this game. It won me over. It did. I came into this game and I did not enjoy it very much for probably about the first 2 hours, because it's kind of like learning a new software when you get a new job. You don't want to learn it. Like, this is very much almost like an industry tool that you're playing around with until you learn all the different functions. You can't learn how they apply once they've been gamified, and so I would say that the learning curve here, if you're not an adventurous person, is probably going to be a bit to wrangle with, just getting used to all the tools and how everything connects together. However, once I did that, you've got a really fantastic tool here for creativity that I think some people are really going to get into and make some absolutely incredible stuff with it. As far as the gameplay goes, I do think that they need to find ways to draw the narrative more effectively into the swordsmithing gameplay, be that through reputations with different factions that are trying to take over the city, or groups of adventurers that are going out to take out lairs. I only did like one questy thing so far inside the den, so I don't know if there's more after that. I hope there is, because that's the one thing that stands out to me, is that the narrative seems very optional with the kind of narrative RPG thing that it's got going on back inside the den. I'm hoping that the whole city opens up and then I can walk around and talk to different people and support factions and things like that as they go to battle monsters out in the wasteland, and it'll actually change the effect of the narrative and whatnot, because this game would be a bopper if they could manage to get that all hooked up, but that's a lot of work and a lot of branching paths and things of that nature. Still, if you're not a creative person, the gameplay here is going to get really repetitive, because you can stamp out a bare basic crappy sword in like 8 seconds and get 80% satisfaction, and every single sword will look the same. This game is really hoping that you'll get drawn into the sword making and sucked in for hours while you create this custom masterpiece that you're not earning any more money for just because it's fun and it's allowing you to express yourself. If you don't have that, this game is more or less just kind of like a grind with some nice little narrative dialogue inside of there. I haven't got to hiring employees or anything yet, and so it's possible that I just didn't get far enough into the game, but I'm sitting at like 4 hours played right now, and so at a certain point it becomes a review, not a preview, like I always say, and so I figured I would pinch it off and go ahead and give you guys my closing thoughts. There's a lot of room here for quality of life and indicating what's going to happen when a player takes certain actions. The way that you research various parts for your swords, like the hilts and whatnot, it's fine. 3 of them allows you to memorize it and craft it for yourself, but the menu that they use for doing that is really inconvenient and really kind of a pain in the ass to interact with. Plus, it'll allow you to research the same set of objects twice, so it's difficult for you to remember what you have and what you don't have. That needs to be cleaned up before I would go to a commercial release. But for right now, if you are looking to extend your creativity, this is a good option. And then from there, I would say wait and see for everybody else that wants to see how they integrate the swordsmithing itself into the actual game parts of the game. My name is Splattercat. I sift through the pile to find what's worthwhile in the world of indie games every single day so you don't have to. Today up on the chopping block, we're fooling around with Bladesong, which is quite a unique little title. I don't really know what to think about it, but I like it much more now than I did when I first started out, after I got over the learning hill. And so once I started being able to get creative with stuff, I definitely started enjoying it more. I feel bad. I told the developers it wasn't the game for me and I wasn't going to cover it, and now I'm going back on that because I played it for a few more hours, learned the tools better, and changed my views entirely. But, you know, at least they're getting a video, all right? I will see you all tomorrow with something hot and fresh off the indie skillet. I'm taking off. Bye, folks.